unless we bring you in for a live question. But it's assumed that that's okay with you. If you're staying on, then it's assumed that you're happy for that to happen. Your comments in chat won't be seen on the recording, so feel free to say silly stuff and don't worry too much about making mistakes on there. That won't be made available. For anybody who doesn't get to see the session, we will be putting that onto our YouTube and onto our website, the recording of it. So yeah, that'll be taking place. The other thing that we'll be doing with this session is we will be hosting, sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? Streaming, that's it. All new tech for me. Streaming this live to our Facebook page. So that is also just coming online now.
Been coming from all the way from Scotland to join us.
Oh, wow, look at that. Yeah, so I mean, these sessions have been spreading. We're getting quite a few people coming from all over the place, and also just to say, so you know, I'm from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, but actually, what we've started doing now is we're now sharing these events with Staffordshire Wildlife Trust and Cheshire Wildlife Trust and Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust. So so we're all one big happy family of wildlife trusts, and future events will be kind of rotated between us. So do please continue to join us. And learn more about wildlife across all of those counties. And indeed, you don't have to be from one of those counties to join us. Lots of you aren't. And bees know no boundaries. Or maybe is it borders? Maybe they do have boundaries. Hopefully Rodri will cover that.
Only the cricketing ones.
Okay, well, I think we've got quite a few people with us. So I think should we start off? So how about we do some introductions? So so my name's Ben, and I'm from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. And over to you guys.
I'll let you go first, Rodri.
Okay, so I'm Rodri Green. I'm a Community Engagement Officer for Bumblebee Conservation Trust in Derbyshire in the Peak District. But like the bees, we kind of have no boundaries and we'll cross over. Bumblebee Conservation is a national charity, so we've got branches everywhere, we've got people everywhere. There's not many of us. It's about 50 staff. So the vast majority of the work that we do is done by volunteers, and we've got quite a few volunteers in Derbyshire, Staffordshire, Peak District area. So hello to any of you who are watching right now.
Yes, if you are one of those, do say hello. We'd love to say hi to you. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rodri. And of course we have Diane.
Yep, I'm Diane Gould and I work for Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. I'm the engagement programme manager, so I spend a lot of my time organising events and delivering events for people to engage with nature. I've worked with Rodri quite a few times before, doing Bumblebee activities at Carsonton with our Junior Rangers group. Hello, if any of you are watching in. And they've created a lovely bumblebee bed there, which I hope will be growing in a beautiful way with us, without us there.
Thank you very much, Diane. So, so as has become customary on these, the first thing that we're going to open with is an exciting quiz. Appropriately, it's all about bumblebees. Diane, would you like to talk us through this?
Yep. So we're going to ask you some quiz questions, and we're going to give you 4 options for your answers. And you've got time to respond. If you bring up the poll tool at the side, you'll be able to, or does that come up automatically? You will be able to choose what your answer is. We'll give you a little bit of time to answer, and then we'll tell you what the right answer is. And you'll be able to see roughly how many people voted for each option. Okay, so our first question. Is it coming?
Yes, it is.
There we go. Right, so wasps, honeybees and bumblebees are all insects. So that means they have how many legs? And your choices are 14, 8, 6 or 4. So how many legs do you think an insect has?
Lots of people voting. Definitely seem to have zeroed in on a particular answer. I think we'll call it there and see what people thought.
Okay, fantastic. You are right, they have 6 legs. 14 legs tends to be animals like shrimp and woodlice. 8 legs is spiders. 4 legs tends to be larger animals like mammals. So well done, yet they are all insects and they all have 6 legs.
So the next question is, what shaped body do bumblebees have? And there should be some options there for you. I can't see them. Here we go. Slim and hairy, fat and hairy, slim with no hairs, or fat with no hairs. So those are your choices.
I'm not sure I'd like some of those descriptions if I was a bumblebee.
I think they'll be quite proud of their description.
You're right, actually, Diane. We should accept ourselves no matter what what our body form.
Body confidence.
Okay, I think we've got a clear winner here. Let's see what people thought.
Yep. So we're going with fat and hairy, which is a good thing to go with. Bumblebees evolved way out in the Himalayas before the Himalayas were there, really. So they're used to those really cool climates, and that fat, hairy body is what helps them to be able to fly early in the morning, late in the evening, early in the year, and later in the year. It's what really kind of distinguishes a bumblebee from another flying insect and other bees. It's that big barrel shape with fur.
That's great, and we've got lots of people getting that one right.
Okay, the next question is, where do bumblebees live? So your options are in hives, in nests made from chewed up paper, in old vole or mice holes, or in underground burrows. Have a think, where do you think they go back to when they've been busy flying around the flowers?
Oh, a couple of people changing their votes here, which is quite interesting.
Didn't even know you could do that.
I didn't know you could either. So there you go. Whoever's doing that has discovered a new part of the technology. Well done, you.
Oh, and Sally's here from Junior Rangers. Hi, Sally.
Okay, so I think we've got an answer here. Let's have a look and see what people thought.
Oh, this one's definitely split them, hasn't it? Well, actually, the answer is in old vole or mice holes. So if you got that one right, you give yourself an extra big pat on the back. Hives is honeybees. Nests made from chewed up paper is actually wasps. And underground burrows is like your solitary bees, that sort of thing. So bumblebees actually nest in old.
That's very specific. And I have no idea about that, so it just goes to show that it's a good thing that I'm not on it.
Yeah, I think like in our dry stone wall, I see them coming and going there, so they must have a nest behind there. But then again, I know that there are rodents living in there as well. Oh, and it's Rose from Forest Schools just sent me a message. Hello.
Okay, so I think this is our last question coming up, maybe?
Oh no, we've got 2 more.
Oh, 2 more. Okay, good.
Okay, so this is an easy one. It's just spot the bumblebee. We've got 4 flying insects there for you to choose from. Only one of them is a bumblebee.
See, now I might have cheated by looking at the ID sheet that was sent out on email, Rodri, to a few people.
But that's not cheating. That's called using your initiative.
Okay, yes, I like that.
It's what ID sheets are for. It's not a memory quiz.
That is true.
I've actually just been dive bombed by a bumblebee flying past my head.
They obviously know they're being spoken about.
I know. They've come to have a look.
Let's have a look and see what people thought.
4. So that's good. That's good going, because it is number 4. We've got some other creatures in there. I can't see them now. Turn my. Whoops. I'm probably going to be turning upside down on all sorts of things here. So look a little bit closer. So we've got a wasp in number 2. We've got a bee fly in number 3, and it looks like a honeybee in number 1.
It was honeybee, yeah.
Bigger screen to confirm. Is that right, Glenn?
Yeah, it was a honeybee.
Yeah, but a little red-tailed bumblebee. It looks like on number 4. I've got a tiny little screen. So.
Okay, so the last question is that we can identify bumblebees by the colour of their tails. Which of these colours would you not see on a bumblebee tail, on a bumblebee bum? Would you not see red, white, purple, or ginger yellow?
That's interesting. Zeroed in on a, feel like we're zeroed in on a particular answer here. Again, one that I wouldn't be confident about answering myself. Let's see what people thought.
You're correct. Purple is not a colour we see on the bumblebees. The other three colours are the colours that we tend to divide them up into when we're identifying them in the initial stages. Audrey will talk more about identifying bumblebees a bit later on. Well done though, if you got that correct.
So why don't you drop into the chat to let us know how you did. So I think at this point it's over to you now, Rodri, to talk to us a little bit more in depth about some of the bees that we might be lucky enough to see this time of year.
Okay, so Benji, you've got Darren. So hopefully that's come up for everyone now.
Yep.
Okay, so thank you very much. Right, I think we're getting good to go. So we've already done a little bit of a quiz, so you should be able to tell me. Is the technology working?
We've got the presentation up, I can see it.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the next slide. Come on, bear with me. This was working in rehearsal. One sec.
Rodri, if we're hitting a problem, I can share them as well. So we'll just give Rodri a moment to try and sort that out. In the meantime, are you seeing any bees in your garden? Tell us a little bit about what you've seen. What have you seen in your garden at the moment, Diane? What kind of different kinds of bees do you see?
Flying past my head at the minute, I've mostly got solitary bees, but there's the occasional bumblebee going past as well. But yeah, I can hear a lot in this long grass.
Oh, somebody's got the big one right on their wildflowers. Freya's got lots and lots of bees in the garden, and Kelly has identified a carpenter bee.
Oh, there's a big red-tailed bumblebee just gone past.
Yeah, there we go. How are we getting on?
Okay, so can we see a picture of 3 different insects on the screen now?
We can indeed, yes.
Okay, so let's see if we can go back to the start. Brilliant. So we've just done our little test. So hopefully everybody knows which of these 3 is the bumblebee. I'm not going to put that out as a poll because we set that as a little bit of homework. So those of you who've done the homework over the last couple of days have probably had a go. And I'm hoping you'll be able to figure out the bumblebee in there. It is, in case anybody's not sure, it's bee in the middle, the big fat furry one. Really easy to tell apart from the other bee on the left-hand side and the wasp on the right-hand side. And the wasp, no hair, really shiny, bright colours. We've got about 9,000 kind of wasps, and only about 8 of them look like that. So I'm not going to talk about the wasps today. What we're talking about is the bees. We've got about 275, roughly, thereabout, species of bee. Because of DNA testing, we're finding new species all the time, but roughly 275. And most of those bees are what we call solitary bees. So these are the bees that will be using your bee hotels. These are the ones that you'll find in the holes in the garden, making pyramids of soil. They're called solitary because the female bee will lay an egg, leave some food for that egg, and then seal it up in itself. So the red mason bee you can see there going into the bamboo of the bee hotel, she'll lay an egg down the bottom of the bamboo tube. She'll leave a little bit of pollen and nectar for it and then seal it up using mud. The one to the right at the top is an ashy mining bee. Does the same sort of thing, but by doing the burrows underground. So the fascinating things, and I've got a bit of bird's foot trefoil here and some catmint that's out of a hanging basket. I've just moved the hanging basket over so you can see it, and it is attracting loads of solitary bees at the moment. So you'll be seeing them buzzing around my head later on.
Roger, I'm just going to temporarily invite you, interrupt you for a second, just to say, for those of us following on Facebook, somebody's posting malicious links on the Facebook feed. It's a really naughty thing to be doing. They're trying to get you to click on them. Don't click on them. Don't click on any links in the Facebook feed. Just watch, post your chat, and enjoy yourselves. But don't click on links in the Facebook feed. And if it is you posting links, well, go away. Okay, back with you, Rodri.
Thank you. So about 250 solitary bees. We've got 24 species of bumblebees. These are the ones that you're familiar with in your back garden. You'll have seen these because they're big and furry. They're easy to spot. And we've only got one species of honeybee. The Apis mellifera mellifera is a UK honeybee. So there's only one species that's native to the UK, but it does get an awful amount of press. And quite often people confuse bumblebees with honeybees, and you'll quite often find pictures in the paper of bumblebees when the article is about honeybees, and vice versa. It's because most of the honeybees that we have in the UK are looked after by people. They're managed, almost farmed bees. They're sort of only half wild. Whereas the solitary bees and bumblebees, they're completely wild. There's no one looking after them except by providing habitat. But honeybees, we like honey. So we like the honeybee, and she does provide a lot of food for us and a lot of pollination as well. And because of all that press, because of all that adoration, it sometimes goes to her head and she can get a little bit big-headed. But our focus today is on the wild bees, and in particular the bumblebees. And bumblebees, they don't make honey. It's only honeybees that make honey. But they are responsible for a lot of the food that you can see. If you can see the bottom right-hand picture, there's a lot of food there that we wouldn't have without bumblebees. As I said, there's 24 different species, and they all look slightly different. They're all different colours, and there's over 60 different colour types. And as you can see from the children looking at the bee charts on the top right, there's a lot to look at. And bumblebees don't die when they sting you, like honeybees, but they are less likely to sting you. They're just more gentle, not aggressive. They're going about their business. So bumblebees, the other big thing that's different is they don't live in hives. So we've already established that from the quiz. This is a little section of a honeybee hive, and you can see there's a lot of honeybee workers in there. But there is a bumblebee that's crept into that picture, crept into the hive. And I'm wondering if you can spot the bumblebee that has crept into the honeybee hive. I'm going to give you a little bit of time. We're getting some answers coming in. If you haven't spotted it yet, we're getting top and left-hand side. And for those of you who haven't spotted it, I'll just make it a little bit easier for you. So that's your bumblebee. And once you've seen it, you can see it's very, very different from honeybees. It's that big, fat barrel shape, not like the slim, slender honeybees. The honeybee's abdomen, the back end of the honeybee, is a lot less hairy than a bumblebee. The other thing is, in that picture, you've got about 60 honeybees. There's probably getting on for 60,000 honeybees in the hive at the height of summer. Whereas bumblebees live in much smaller nests like this, with maybe 50 to 100 bees in the nest at a time, at the height, that is. Some bees will have up to 400, but not many. Most of our bumblebees live underground, like we said, in old mouse burrows or rodent nests, or just above the ground at the foot of hedges in tussocky grass. And as you can see here, it's a lot less neat the way they make their nests. They kind of just pop a little bit on when they need it. It's kind of like adding lots and lots of extensions, and it's all self-built. It's a family group, and the queen is the most important. She's the mother of all the bees in that nest, and she will have spent the winter underground hibernating. She comes out and she makes a nest, and all the workers and males in that nest are her daughters and sons. So the workers look like small versions of the queen, maybe a third the size. Quite often they're the same colour as the queen, but sometimes, like in this early worker you can see here, they've got slightly different coloration. She's missing the yellow band that the queen had. But you can see she's a worker because she's got a big load of pollen stuck to her back leg that she's going to take back to feed her sisters and brothers back at the nest. The brothers will be, the male bees will be come later on in the season. So the queen lays several broods. The first few are female worker bees, the sisters who do the work. The males, the last set of bees almost to be laid, and they will come out. They won't do any work around the nest. They'll just drink the provisions, the nectar that's stored there, and then they'll leave the nest never to return. So the males are the ones you'll quite often see out and about in the summer, late summer, lazing around on flowers. And this one's been quite cheeky. You can see its tongue is sticking into the back end of the comfrey flower here. It's actually doing what we call nectar robbing. So it's taking nectar from the nectary at the bottom of the flower without actually going inside and picking up nectar. Sorry, picking up pollen. But most of our bumblebees will go in and pollinate plants really well. So this is just a quick whiz through the life cycle of the bumblebee. It's an annual life cycle, as I said. Only the queen survives at the end of summer. So new queens will be born this summer. They'll go into hibernation after mating. They'll come out in the spring and feed on early spring flowers. So that's why your crocuses in the garden are really important. But willow trees as well, fantastic. And then she'll start to make a little nest, and she just makes one little wax pot that she fills with nectar to keep her going while she's brooding her first set of eggs that she lays on top of the pollen, a lump of pollen that will feed them when they hatch. She might make occasional journeys out to get more nectar to keep her energy up, but eventually those eggs will hatch and they'll turn into the little worker bees who will help her to make that nest bigger, to fetch more food for the eggs that she's laying as they turn into grubs. And she'll have 2 or 3 more, depending on species and how much food is available. She'll lay a few more batches of eggs, which will turn into workers. The workers, the more food they get as grubs, the bigger they become as a bumblebee. So they'll get gradually bigger as time goes on. And then at the end of the season, when there's plenty of food coming into the nest, she'll lay eggs that turn into the male bumblebees that you saw, who will leave the nest looking for queens. And then the final batch of eggs she'll lay that get fed 3 times as much as a queen, as a worker would, turn into the queens, and they become the new queens who mate with males from another nest. And as soon as they've mated, they'll go into hibernation, and the whole cycle will start again. So it's not moving on. You might skip a couple of slides because it's slowed down. Yeah. So there are 6 bumblebees that we kind of will draw a little veil over. The cuckoo bumblebees, we won't talk too much about them, but they aren't social. They don't live in this nest where they work with their sisters and bring everything in. The cuckoo bumblebee, the female, is a little bit bigger and stronger than a social bumblebee queen, and she'll come out of hibernation a little bit later, and she will attack the queen in her nest. Once that nest has been built, she'll take over that bumblebee queen's nest. She'll go around and lay her own eggs and leave then the workers, in this case a red-tailed bumblebee worker. The workers from the previous nest will raise the cuckoo's eggs, so much like a cuckoo bird. So cuckoos, you'll see, don't have any pollen loads on their legs because they're not hanging around to feed their children. So flowers are really, really important for bumblebees, as you can see. They need the nectar for pollen. They need the nectar for energy, which keeps them going. And because of their wide variety of tongues, they're able to feed from a lot of flowers that other bees can't get into. They can reach the parts of flowers that other bees can't reach, basically, because they've got long tongues. They've also got they take pollen from flowers, which they take back to feed. It's not moving on. Hang on. There we go. They collect the pollen to feed their young back at the nest. The pollen gives them protein to grow. So because of this, they're just super pollinators. And all these fruit and veg that we like to eat, we rely on the bumblebee pollination for it to happen, particularly tomatoes, because it's only bumblebees who can pollinate tomatoes because of something amazing called buzz pollination, which I think we might talk about in the Q&A afterwards. And it's not just fruit and veg, it's all the flowers, it's all the bits of the countryside and the nature that they knit together with their bumbling around from flower to flower. So they're really key to holding the countryside and the Peak District and all, even just the parks and gardens together. But they're in trouble because this is what a bumblebee heaven would look like. Plenty of flowers all the way through the season, nesting spots like the hedgerows and trees there. But we've changed how we look after that plant. And now there's not so much around. And for a bumblebee, there's not really anything to be had in this field that you can see here. But it's not all bad news. We can do something to help. Every little flower makes a difference to bumblebees. Because all they need is two things: food and a home. And food for bumblebees is flowers. That's all they eat, is pollen and nectar. And a home is, as I've said, it could be a mouse hole underground, it could be bottom end of a hedge, it could just be an untidy corner of your garden, a compost heap. And it's really easy. We can plant seeds, we can put flowers in there. And if you want to know what's good flowers for bumblebees, check out our website, Be Kind, on bumblebeeconservation.org. And on there you can find a whole host of bumblebee friendly flowers, and you can sort them by colour, when they flower, and all those kinds of things. So the other thing you can do, which you've already been doing and which we're going to get you out to do now, is look a little more closely. So that's Ben, who's doing the technical operation at the background, looking at Bumblebee for me there. And this is what I'm hoping that some of you have been out about already, but we're going to send you off to do now, which is just have a look a little bit more closely at the bumblebees that are out in your garden and in your parks. Okay. And, we'll skip the parts of a bee very quickly. There are 3 parts of a bee. I'll do it very quickly. The head, which is the part that moves the bee, that helps the bee interact with the world. The thorax, which is the motor of the bee. This is where the legs and wings attach. This is what's moving that bee around. And then the abdomen has all the soft parts. So this is what we're going to go and have a look at now, if you want to, which is the bumblebees in your back garden. And there's 8 different kinds of bumblebee. We distinguish them by the colour of their tail and the colour of the stripes on their body. And this is, we call them the big 8, and this is what they look like. And I'm going to pass you back to Ben now.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for that, Rodri. That was really, really interesting. So we've got your ID of the different types of bee still up on screen there. So if you want to stop sharing, and I think probably it's about time in the session to get up and get active. What do we think about that? I've got 1 or 2 people saying, do they have to? Well, you don't have to, but I think you might find it's fun, right? That's what I think. So what do you think, Diane? Would you like to tell people about what we've got planned and how we can get them moving around?
Indeed.
Yeah.
You might not feel like getting up, maybe it's a little bit too warm, but imagine being a bumblebee and flying around with that big furry coat on. So go out and join them and see what you can find. So I'm sure you've all heard the saying before, as busy as a bumblebee. There's a very good reason why people say that. Bees are incredibly busy animals. They're just flying about all the time from flower to flower and from flower to the nest. And as Rodri said, it's because they get 2 things from the flowers. They get pollen, which they use to feed themselves and the grubs, and that gives them protein to help them grow. And they also get a sugary drink called nectar. And this gives them the energy to fly. Now, the nectar is hidden quite deep inside the flowers. And have you ever noticed how many different shapes of flower there are? What we want you to do is go out and have a look at the flowers that are near you in your garden. If you've got a window box, anywhere where you can see flowers, have a look at them and see if you can see a lot of different shapes. So we're showing you on the screen a picture, which is one of the sheets which you may have got beforehand, which is our flower shape bingo. And you can have a look to see if you can find those different shapes. If you don't have that sheet, don't worry, you can still just look and see what variety you can find. Now, you need to look really, really closely at the flowers to see what the shape is, because, so for example, lying here, I've got this, it's a cow parsley, and pulling some flowers over. Can you see that? A buttercup. Now, they look really quite different at first glance, but when you look closely, the petals actually have exactly the same arrangement, and they're that cruciform or cross arrangement, so they would be the same. So look really carefully to be able to tell the difference. Then we have other flowers, such as, we put this one over. Can you see that yet? Okay, so that's a clover, and you might look at that immediately and think, that's not on the sheet. If you look really carefully at the individual petals, you'll see that it is on the sheet. So just look very carefully at the plants and see how many different flower shapes you can find. Because as Rodri says, bees have different length tongues and they need different sort of shapes of flowers. We'll talk more about that when you come back. The second challenge is to see how fast you can flap your wings. All right, so what we want you to do is full wing flap, all the way up, all the way down. Count how many flaps you can do in 10 seconds. Either use a stopwatch, if you haven't got a stopwatch, do some counting. Like with the beavers last week, the official counting technique for this is 1 bumblebee, 2 bumblebee, and so on. Count how many you can get in 10 counts or seconds, divide that by 10, and that'll tell you how many flaps you can do per second. When you come back, we'll tell you roughly how many a bumblebee can do, and you can see if you're as busy as a bumblebee. So you've got about 10 minutes to go out and do this. I can't see what time it is at the moment.
It is 33 minutes past, so let's say let's try and come back for 2:40, shall we say. But if you take a bit longer, that's fine, or if you're a bit quicker, that's fine as well. We'll be here.
Okay, and when you come back, tell us maybe in the chat how many different types of flower you found, whether they're all the same, whether they're different, what you noticed about them, and how many flaps you could do in a second.
Now, last time we did this activity, of course, I volunteered and stood on one leg as part of
Are you going to do it again today?
Well, I'm just wondering, I mean, I'm not sure that my camera angle based here is the best position, but I do wonder if Diane or Rodri would like to attempt to buzz like a bee.
Do you want me to flap my wings?
I think it would be cool.
I might have to try and peel myself off the floor here. Somebody else will have to time me, say go and say stop.
Okay, so the official
I can count the flaps if somebody does the time.
Okay, you do the flaps, I'll do the time. You ready?
Okay, you say go.
Okay, go. 1 bumblebee, 2 bumblebee, 3 bumblebee, 4 bumblebee, 5 bumblebee, 6 bumblebee, 7 bumblebee, 8 bumblebee, 9 bumblebee, 10 bumblebees. Stop. How many did you get?
I managed 12.
12, so that's 1.2 a second. Wow.
My neighbours are also all going to think I'm balmy now as well. They're flapping in front of a computer.
You already did. What? Eva Moncaster's got 11. That's not 11 per second, I hope, otherwise you'd be taking off. Wow. Lots of people with lots of very serious flapping going on.
They're obviously a bit more energetic than me.
There's a certain amount of dexterity that's involved in a buzz, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to try it this time.
Yeah, they're all faster than me, aren't they?
I think, yeah. I think universally, yes. Yeah. Oh, don't take that.
I'm assuming they're all younger than me.
I was going to say they're probably in the main some younger buzzers. How many times? How many times does a bee do? Did you see?
Oh, going to reveal that when they all come back.
Ah, right. Okay. 26 from Joseph and Will.
Is that together?
Sorry, 30 from Joseph and 30 from Aaron Bananas as well. So I presume that must be 30 in 10 seconds. So lots of very high numbers. Oh, and I got
20 from Niall in Liverpool. Good place to be from.
Is that where you're from by any chance, Diane?
Yep.
Well, and Poppy's up at 5 per second. You must be nearly flying with that one.
She must be over the roof by now.
I mean, I think Amelia, I'm not sure. 80 flaps. I think you probably have taken off there.
Surprised you can still type the answer in and they're not flying above the roof.
Perhaps they've got someone else doing it because they're stuck. Well, we've got Dill, Griffin, Vicky, all pretty close. 2.8, 3.5, 3.2.
I think maybe the 80 was in 10 seconds.
Yeah, well, even that would still be impressive. That's eight flaps a second. I'm absolutely sure I can't do that. Perhaps it was perhaps they're flapping just with a shortened wing tip there.
Yeah. Fingertips.
Good results in from Farron and Athenia as well, and Jack.
Well, 4th per second from Jack. Oh, well, he's beaten me.
There you go. Well, Poppy's going to try again.
Well, it was Poppy who did the really good leg stand last week, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah, I think she lasted
determined to get in there and get the top mark.
You know, it's really interesting.
Sorry?
It's really interesting, Ben, how when we do this out in the field, when we're able to go out and about, Diane, it's usually in the region of 20 people manage in 10 seconds, isn't it? It's amazing how being at home online just makes you flap so much quicker.
What are you saying, Rodri?
Maybe it's the radio waves or something.
It must be, yes. Maybe the Bumblebee clocks need recalibrating. Freya's asking if we can see them. No, Freya, we can't see you, so we can't verify how many flaps you're actually doing. So it's an honesty-based system. Oh, there we go. And Helen has cottoned on to the honesty-based system. Well over 10 million. Helen, in fact, is actually a bee.
Oh, 3 types of flour.
There we go, yeah. So Zoe, did you think about shapes? What kind of shapes did you get with those 3 types of flour that you found? Also, for those of you putting questions, there's some more detailed questions you're posting into the chat. Actually, we'll be putting those in the Q&A box later on. So down at the bottom, if you've got detailed questions, you know, if you want to ask things of like Liam's question there about bumblebees when they came into the world, then put them in the Q&A, and we will answer as many of those as we can shortly. So your kids, Diane, are going in for 1 billion. So how many flaps? Possibly need some independent.
They're just blatant liars.
Yes. Ooh, question about flower shapes.
All we have is buttercups. Is that okay? What would lavender be? That is, they have the very narrow tubes, don't they? Without looking at it closely. And I'd have to run over there for 5 minutes to get a piece of lavender. But yeah, made up of the small individual tubes. Daisies and dandelions, they're like the cross. Although they might not just be a cross with 4, any number of petals, but basically that broad flat shape, that's counted as the cross.
We've got some results coming in on the people who are watching on Facebook as well. So Catherine has had 2 goes at the buzzing, and the first is 1.7 and the second 3.7 a second. So shown a lot of acceleration there. Well done, Catherine.
And if actually somebody's asked about what shape roses are. Some garden flowers, like roses and others that have been specifically designed to go in people's gardens, don't have like a standard shape. They've been designed and engineered to be the way they are, and they often don't actually have much nectar in for bumblebees and other bees and pollinators. So that's one thing I was going to say, is that the more natural looking plants, they're the ones to plant if you want to attract bees.
So 5 different types of flowers spotted by Alice and Sarah.
How are we doing for time? time?
Oh, well, I mean, it should be about time that for people to be coming back to us. I think, and clearly people are. We've got lots of people posting stuff in the chat. Poppy's at 78 flaps in 10 seconds now. I mean, Poppy, I have to say, if you're achieving those kinds of rates, you should probably look at a world record. That would be my advice.
I bet Poppy sleeps really well after our webinars, doesn't it?
She does. Lots of people still sending in information. So Freya's got a rooftop garden for bees on their bike shelter, which is a great idea. How about at this point we open up to some questions from people on the call. So
Shall I just give them the answer to the flapping?
that's a good idea. That's a very good idea.
Okay, so you did a great job looking for the different flower shapes and that, and the biggest tip we can give you on attracting bees and other pollinators to your garden is try and plant as many different flower shapes as possible, because these bees have different length tongues. So the shortest bee tongue doesn't reach very far, so they tend to like the open flowers, the large open flowers, whereas the garden bumblebee has the longest tongue of the bumblebees, and it's 2 centimeters long. And that might not sound a lot, but when you think of the size of a bumblebee, that's quite big. And it's the same as us standing up really straight, not bending over, putting your tongue out and being able to lick between your toes. So it's quite enormous. So obviously, if you can plant different shapes of flowers, you're going to attract a different type of bees to your garden. For the wing flapping, you all did amazing jobs. And apart from the person who got 100,000 or something like that, I'm afraid none of you came close to the bumblebees. They actually flap their wings at 200 times a second.
Wow.
And harder than it sounds, because they don't just go up and down. A bumblebee flaps its wings in a figure of 8 shape. So they then fly more like a helicopter than a plane, which is why they can fly given their big bodies. So if you want to try again later, try and do how many figure of 8 shapes can you do with your hand in a second, and see if you can get near 200.
I think you probably would take off then. That's really interesting. Circling back on your thought about different kinds of flowers, a question from me actually for Roger and Diane. Presumably that would work even if you've got like a window box or just a small space. Is it still worth planting the variety to provide that that benefit to bumblebees?
Yeah, so if you've got space, obviously plant as much as you can. If you've only got a small space, then you're possibly better planting a lot of one particular flower and work with your neighbours to get them to plant something that plants flowers at a different time. What we usually say is to aim for 2 flowering plants per season or per part season. So spring, early summer, midsummer, late summer, into autumn. 2 different bumblebee friendly plants in flower at any given time is really good going. But obviously in a small window box, maybe if you've only got 1 plant pot, something like heather, heather late in the season and lavender early in the season. But there's plenty of things that you can get. This little window box, this little hanging basket here is just planted with 4 different plants, but it's all just in one hanging basket. And we've got a variety of different flower shapes and flowering seasons in there as well.
That's great. Thanks very much for those tips there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start trying to answer a few questions live. So this bit of the session is always quite fun as I try and get all that technology to work. So do bear with us. What I'm going to do is I'll just try and bring you in and give you the opportunity to answer your question. When I do bring you in, just wait for me to introduce you before you talk, just because we might have a few people at once that are waiting to speak. And it can get a little bit hectic. So the first person we're going to go across to is Alice and Sarah. Alice and Sarah, if you are there, your microphone should be able to work now. So let's see if it is working. Hello. So. Are you there, Alice and Sarah? Okay, so we can't get across the question from Alice and Sarah, so I'm just going to ask it on their behalf. So Alice and Sarah have asked, what are the predators for bees? So are there any bee predators?
Yeah, so a big predator for bees is birds, particularly blue tits and great tits, they'll peck out the middle of a bumblebee and take the juicy insides from them and leave the rest of the bee around. So I think someone had posted a little bit earlier on about finding a hollowed out bee. The other thing that will go for bumblebees whilst they're nesting is some of our lovely mammals like hedgehogs and badgers will take bumblebee nests because there's a lot of nectar and a lot of protein in those little grubs inside the bumblebee nest. But the other things they need to watch out for are their parasitic wasps that will come and attack them. There are spiders that will wait for them to come to the flower and then jump on them whilst they're on the flower. So there's a lot of things out there. But for all those predators, the biggest problem for bumblebees is the loss of habitat and the loss of flowers, because the predators have been there all along and they've managed to survive for a long time with those predators still after them. But those are the predators that we're looking at.
That's great. Thank you very much for the question. So we're going to go across to Hayley now, who has got a question to ask about their loft, I think.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. I'm really enjoying this so far, by the way, so thank you so much. I've learned loads already. Yeah, so in our garage, we've got a roll of loft insulation, and we've realised that there are lots and lots of bees in there now, so they've clearly made a home out of it. So I just wanted to ask how we can make their stay comfortable. Do I need to leave them like water and things like that? What would you recommend to keep them safe and happy?
You want me to take this one? Yeah. Okay, so if you've got bees there, then you're already doing something that's fantastic for them. They won't have come and made a nest unless they think this is a brilliant place to make a nest. So they'll be able to provision themselves perfectly well as long as they're left in peace. Bumblebees are not great at, they can make little wax pots and they can make their internal nests, but they can't do too much around creating a warm environment. So loft insulation is perfect for them. This is why they take over mouse nests and other vole nests and things like that, because the nesting material is already there and they just have to do a little bit of fashioning it into the right shape. The common carder bee that nests just under hedgerows and in tussocky grass, again, will kind of just manipulate the grasses. That's where it gets its name of the carder bee, because it's kind of carding it like wool to make a little nest space. But they're not great at creating nests, not like birds, for instance. So if you've got a nice roll of insulation up there, it's a kind of ready-made nest space. And yeah, it's already doing what it needs to do. So you can leave them in peace and they'll get on.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you very much, Hayley. So we're going to go across to Buzz. So, Buzz, do please let us know your name as well as I bring you in.
I don't know if that's me, but it's really not meant to say Buzz, so I obviously did something wrong then.
Sorry, if that's Emma. Sorry, Emma, if you hang on 1 second, sorry, it is Buzz.
Oh, okay.
So, Buzz, just trying to bring you in now, see if we can get that to work. And we are having a problem with Buzz's mic by the look of it. So Buzz's question was, do all 270 types of bee sting? That's an interesting question.
That's a really good question. Diane, did you want to get this one?
You're the bumblebee expert. I just know that it's not even for each type of species. Not all of them sting, do they?
No. So only females can sting, and the little solitary bees that I've got buzzing around me as we're talking here now, some of their stings are so tiny that they wouldn't even break the skin. Male bees can't sting at all, so they just don't have the sting. They don't have the apparatus to do it. So of those 275 bee species, they've all got the ability to sting, but most of them wouldn't sting to any extent. It's the honeybees and some of the bumbles that are more likely to sting in a way that you'd notice, but most of the solitary bees, their sting is so small you wouldn't notice even if you got it stung.
That's great. Thanks very much.
We put something on well, didn't we? Sorry, just saying. We put something on one of our sheets as well, that often a bumblebee will give you a warning when it's feeling agitated first, and it'll lift its leg up at you as if to say, just back off.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. How easy is it to spot that warning?
It's like the bee's giving you a high five, isn't it, Diane?
Yeah, if you're sitting and watching it, then you'll see the leg go up. But obviously, if you're not watching it, you won't see it.
Most people who end up being stung by bumbles, because bumblebees are so gentle, it's generally because they've not noticed the bumblebee before they put their foot down or sat on it or put their hand behind them whilst they were having a picnic, and it's accidental. Because bumblebees will sting in defence. There's a bumblebee just going into a foxglove to my right. That's fantastic. Yeah, so bumblebees will sting in defence, whereas honeybees are protecting their stores of honey in the hive, so they're possibly a little bit more prone to taking it into their own hands. And obviously wasps, because wasps are predators, wasps are meat eaters, where bumblebees, honeybees, all those 275 bees are vegetarian, they're just eating flowers. The wasps are actually going after other flying insects and other crawling insects, so their sting is their attack, so they're more likely to attack.
Really interesting. Thank you very much. Thanks for the question, Buzz. Let's go across to Emma now and hear from her.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, it was just over the past few years, everyone's been hearing about how bad things have been getting for bees, and I just wondered whether we'd got any indication yet about whether their numbers were starting to increase again.
So as a charity, one of the things that we do, why we encourage people to look more closely, is we run a monitoring scheme called Bee Walk, which is monitoring not only where bees are found, so not only where they are around the country, but also how many of them there are. So it gives us an idea of population going up or down. And generally, it's still not great news for bumblebees. Populations are, on the whole, going down, but there are some bees that are starting to pick up again, and there are some areas where work has been done and you can see the benefit that's been had from that habitat work in increasing numbers in those areas. But as with most wildlife across the board, it's not fantastic news at the moment. There are a couple of bees that are bucking the trend. So the tree bumblebee, which is, you might have found, someone was saying they've got some bees made a nest in a bird box. More than likely that's tree bumblebees. They came over to this country in 2001 and they've spread all the way up to Scotland now. So they're doing really well, but we're providing lots of nesting habitat for them in the way of bird boxes. So that could well be one of many factors that make that the case for them. Also, the buff-tailed bumblebee, which is our biggest and earliest out bumblebee, is now starting to be active through the winter as well. It's kind of making use of the warmer winters that we're getting. So that might be slightly increasing as well. But generally, the picture is still one of reasonable decline. Hope that's. Can you still hear me? I am.
So, thank you for your question, Emma. Well, yes, it's a shame it's such a gloomy answer on that one, but I think we can all do what we can to try and reverse that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to go across to Neil now, who has a question. So I'm just going to unmute your mic and please ask away. Hello. This sometimes happens. Hi, Neem. Are you there? Okay, it sounds like they're not there right now. So what we'll do, we'll just try and come back to them in a second. We're going to go across to Poppy, who's got a question as well. So Poppy, I'm just unmuting you now. Can you hear us? And can you ask a question?
What is a group of bumblebees called?
That's a really good question. So, yeah, I don't know. Is a really quick answer. So you're talking about like a gaggle of geese or a herd of cows. What is a the collective term for bumblebees? Is that the question you're asking?
Yes.
I think that's a brilliant question. I've never been asked it before. One of the things that we like to do when we're doing question and answer sessions is get questions that we can't answer, because we have a fantastic team of scientists and conservationists working with us in the trust, and they spend time answering questions, and I love to be able to send a question up to them in the hope that they won't be able to answer it. I suspect that Richard, who's our science manager, will be able to answer that. So what I can do is I can send him the question whilst we're talking and see whether it comes back with an answer. But I don't know, and that's a fantastic question. Thank you.
I've had a look up to see, and it depends on the context that you use it in. So it can be a swarm of bees, a nest of bees, a rabble of bees, or a stand of bees.
I like a rabble of bees.
So one thing I know for certain is with bumblebees, it's never a swarm, because bumblebees don't swarm. Honeybees swarm. A swarm is about 20,000 bees or 10 to 20,000 bees, honeybees, leaving a hive with an old queen or a new queen. But bumblebees don't do that. So the most bumblebees, as I said, in a really big nest, you might get 400 bumblebees. But most nests are much smaller, so you wouldn't get a swarm of bumblebees. You might get a small cloud of bumblebees just outside a tree bumblebee nest in summer, which is males waiting for new queens to come out. But yeah, go with any of the others, but not the swarm.
What a great question! Thank you so much, Poppy. I think you stumped us there. Let's see if we can get Neen back on and just see if she happens to be there. If not, I'll ask her question myself.
Is it Neve?
Oh, Neve. Sorry, Neve. There you go. Thank you, Rodri.
When did bumblebees come into the world?
When did bumblebees come into the world? That's a really good question as well. Like I say, they evolved millions of years ago, between 40 million and 25 million years ago. Bees themselves came about a lot longer ago than that, but bumblebees, so around the 30 million years ago mark. So they've been around a long time, longer than us. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What a great question. Thank you very much. And sorry for pronouncing your name wrong. Neve. Pleasure. Okay, we're going to go across. I think I've got Richard here with a question. So let's try and unmute Richard. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Richard.
Yeah, Richard's doesn't like there's an issue there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Richard's question. So Richard has a flat with no garden, but has borrowed a 1.3 metre communal patch outside of his window. I think borrowed could potentially be in inverted commas there. He's been replacing poor shrubs with pollinator plants, but I'm doing a lot with little. Is it better, he says, for bees to have lots of different plants in one small space, like salvia, foxgloves, lavender, trefoils, buddleia, and catmint? Or should he just plant a complete wall of one thing like catmint and focus on that one plant?
That is a fantastic question. Thanks, Richard. And what I would say is it depends. There's a lot of answers to questions that say it depends. And this is going to depend on what else is around where you live. So if there is a wide variety of habitat nearby, if there's lots of flowers that are flowering throughout the year, then you can go with putting a little patch out there that's going to give you a good early spring or a good late summer showing of flowers, because maybe other people have got things flowering throughout the seasons. Generally, in towns and cities, there's a lot going on midsummer, because people like to have those summer flowering plants, and there's not so much early in the season and later into the season. So if you're only going to go with one or two flowers, maybe going for something that comes in early. So something like we've got a fantastic plant here. I don't know if I can. This is bugle, which flowers. This has already gone over now. This has stopped flowering, but it kind of grows. In America they call it bugle weed, so it looks after itself, and it shoots up these beautiful blue spires of bumblebee and solitary bee friendly flowers early in sort of late February, March, depending on where you are, right through till, like I say, it's just starting to finish now. And then maybe something like a sedum that will flower later into the autumn and give flowers later on. If there's nothing around, then having a patch that's got a bit of everything going is also good. But the idea is to try and get something going throughout the season. If there's a bigger patch, then it's going to be of more use to bees because they're not going to have to travel from one patch of flowers to the next, if that makes sense. So it's all about looking at what else is out there and maybe talking to your neighbours. And if you can get your neighbours to help out, if there's more communal patches that can be borrowed, that'd be great.
That's great. Thank you very much for that question. So we're actually we're at the end of our allotted time, so we will be wrapping up pretty soon. So I'm sorry we haven't managed to get to all of the questions. I know lots of questions have been asked. So what we do try and do is attempt to answer questions that you email in. So if you've not had the opportunity to get your question answered, then do send it in to inquiries. Well, the email addresses are on our website, so it'll be inquiries@derbyshirewt.co.uk, or indeed you can send them to Staffordshire, and Rothermore, or Cheshire Wildlife Trust, or indeed straight to Rhodri at the Bee Conservation, and we will try and get back to as many of you as possible. We do have time for a couple more quick questions, and one that I've noticed coming up quite a lot, so I'm just going to ask you myself, but for example, we've had Helen on Facebook who's asked that, and Catherine also has asked about this as well. And it's to do with feeding or putting water down or sugary water down for bees. So should we do that if we see them looking tired or in trouble in some way? Is that the right thing to do, or should we just leave them to carry on in their own way?
That's a really good question, Ben. So thank you to everyone who's brought that up and asked it, because the guidance that we're giving out has changed quite recently on this. We used to say if you see a bumblebee on the floor and it's looking tired and not moving around, to give it a little bit of sugar and water on a spoon, not honey, because honey's got other impurities in it, but just white sugar and water mixed together. However, we've now changed our advice on that. So research has shown that bumblebees spend a lot more time just resting than we ever thought they did. So quite often, especially now when there's plenty of forage around, when there's plenty of flowers about, quite often what you're seeing is a bumblebee that's just getting its breath back, and they can rest for sometimes up to 40 minutes. So our new advice is, when you see the bumblebee on the floor and it's not moving around, is just stay, watch it for 40 minutes. And if it hasn't moved after 40 minutes, then you can give a little bit of sugar and water on the spoon. And if you haven't got time to stand for 40 minutes watching a bumblebee, well, what is this life? It's full of care. We have no time to stand and stand. Or you could just pick it up and pop it onto a flower nearby. If it's a resting bee, it will just probably crawl onto your finger. You could put it up onto a flower, and then if it is needing food, it will feed itself. This happened to us last week, just outside the front door of our house. Next door neighbours found a bee that was struggling a little bit. It didn't revive, so we just popped it onto a flower and it was able to feed us.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for some clarity there. So we're going to have time for one last question. So we're going to go across to Rachel with our final question. But before we do, I just want to talk about next week's session that we'll be hosting. So it's the same time, and you will be able to find this in the same place. So go to the webpage of your local wildlife trust. The session next week's a really interesting one. The session is called Nature Detectives. It's going to be hosted by Cheshire Wildlife Trust. And what they're going to be looking at is, what are the signs that you can follow, the things that you can look for that tell you about what animals and species there are in the area that you're looking at, if you can't spot the species themselves. So, I guess that's things like footprints and all sorts of other signs that you might be seeing. So for Nature Detectives, please do join us next week. We really hope that you can be there. So for our last question, let's go across to Rachel Emblem. So what was your question for the Diana?
Hiya, it's my son Tom that would like to ask, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hello, Tom.
Hello.
Nice and loud.
Hello.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
What are your favourite bees?
Nice and loud.
What are your favourite bees?
Ooh, great question. Who's going to
Do
go
you want me to
first?
go?
So to all of the
Well,
panelists, what are your favourite bees?
Well, for me, without a doubt, it's the bumblebee that's on here, and that's the bilberry bumblebee. The bilberry bumblebee is our local specialist. It lives up on the high mountains and moors in Staffordshire moorlands and Derbyshire Peak District and up around Sheffield moorland as well. And she's got this bright orange tail, goes almost all the way up to her waist. She's really quite small, cute little thing with yellow strips on the top, bright orange tail, and lives on the moors, but will come off, and you'll find her even at places like the car park at Longshore, you know that, or down by the Roaches around Tittersworth, you'll find her just feeding in late summer on clover a lot of the time. And she's a beautiful little jewel of the Peak District.
Lovely, thank you very much. What about yourself, Diane? Have you got a favourite?
I think I like the Carder bumblebees. I like the colour of them. They're quite unusual. They don't look as you would think of as everyone thinks of bumblebees as being black, yellow and white. I like them. And they look almost like little tiny teddy bears flying because they're sort of gingery orange colour.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much. Do you have a favourite type of bee, Tom? Favourite type of bumblebee?
No, all of them. Yeah.
I'm just like you. I love them all as well.
Oh, thank you very much.
With that, thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us, Roger. It's been really great to have your insight and for you to share so much information with us. And thank you for all the good work that you are doing. Yep, speak to you all later. Hope to see lots of you next week. Bye.
Thank you.